barracks wall.
As soon as the lights went out during the night, we were able to pull him by his legs out of sight of the guards, rubbed him until he was warm, and gave him something to eat. The next morning, he was standing in line again. Not one of them died.
Protestant church leader Martin Niemöller, once a prisoner himself, paid tribute to the witnesses in a sermon.
The Bibelforscher by the hundreds and thousands have gone into concentration camps and died because they refused to serve in war and declined to fire on human beings.
In den Jahren 1939
From 1939 to 1941, the SS raged against Jehovah's Witnesses with unimaginable cruelty. They employed every form of torture and torment against them, so as to break Jehovah's Witnesses.
Zeugen Jehovas zu brechen.
Often during the winter of 1940 to 1941, they were put soaking wet out in the cold at 10 to 15 degrees below freezing.
Many Jehovah's Witnesses in concentration camps did not survive this misery. To take just one example of this, within a 6-month period in 1939 to 1940, in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, every third Bible student inmate, every third Jehovah's Witness lost his life.
Another SS torture method was the hanging stake. Gertrude's husband, Martin, had experienced it and described it to her.
His hands were tied behind his back, and the person stood on a platform until he was fastened backwards onto the stake. And then the platform was taken away, so that the whole body fell forward, hands folded behind the back, and that for a whole hour.
With the nation at war, the death sentence became official Nazi policy in military courts.
What became especially dangerous for them was that they refused military service, because after the war began in 1939, that meant they could be condemned to death, based on the article of faith that Jehovah's Witnesses want to obey God more than men. They follow the command of neutrality.
My father was executed in 1939, after he had been called up for military service and explained his standpoint, on December 7, 1939.
Am 7. Dezember 39. Und später mein Bruder.
Later, in March 1942, my brother, he was 21 years old, also was executed for refusing military service.
At Brandenburg prison, the lives of 2,743 men were cut short. Passing through a metal door, they came face to face with a guillotine's blade or a hanging hook.
There were 32 Jehovah's Witnesses among these. I'll name just one. For instance, Wolfgang Kusserow. Wolfgang Kusserow, a young man who stuck resolutely to his convictions and did not give in. He met his death here fearlessly, in the absolute conviction of having behaved properly in this life.
A prison guard told Josef Niklash that there was something different about the way witnesses face death.
Well, other prisoners resist. Some even screamed. You could hear them screaming. But, he said, your people go to the gallows, talking about God's kingdom up to their last moment.
Horst Schmidt was among more than 250 Jehovah's Witnesses sentenced to death. He was sitting in a death cell at Brandenburg with 2 other men awaiting execution.
We heard a very loud clattering noise, the clattering of keys. And doors were opened and slammed shut.
The guard opened their cell door. He called the first man out.
Then the guard looked at his list once more and read out the name of the other and said again, "Step outside." Well, you think, of course, it's my turn now. And he looked at his list, and then he looked at me, and then the door closed. Then, of course, you just collapse. That's obvious.
Horst Schmidt escaped the guillotine. His foster mother, Emmy Zeden, did not. She was imprisoned in Berlin-Plötzensee for concealing Horst and 2 other conscientious objectors. On June 9th, 1944, she was beheaded. A street just outside the prison has been named in her honor. The tide of the war had turned. The fall of the Third Reich was within sight. The sounds of distant artillery fire raised hopes among the prisoners that freedom was near. But with the Nazi front on the verge of collapse, the SS tried to empty the camps and force the prisoners to march west and south. Josef Schön was on the death march to Dachau.
They were with the rifles hitting the doors, step out, step out. That was the beginning of a death march. And they said to us, "You will none of you will be turned over to the enemies." That means they will finish us off before everyone who grew weak was shot.
A stone commemorates the site of another death march. Along with thousands of others, 220 witnesses were forced out of Sachsenhausen.
This was not the only death march. There were several others.
In late April 1945, a handful of Jehovah's Witnesses from the Stutthof camp in the eastern part of Germany, together with other prisoners, were forced onto a small barge to cross the Baltic Sea.
Those 10 days at sea were dreadful. And some, including our Martel Malinke, became deathly ill. She died soon after the liberation. We were more dead than alive. We weren't people and didn't look like them either.
On May 5th, 300 prisoners, 15 of them witnesses, landed on an island off the coast of Denmark. Danish witnesses heard the news and rushed to meet them.
When we realized that these were our brothers and sisters, and that we knew what they had been through in the concentration camps, the treatment they had been so, we knew all about these things. But this was the first time that we met somebody that had been in a concentration camp. You can imagine the impression.
So after some talking, I was finally permitted to go on board. Yes, I must say it was a great shock for me to see them. I shall never forget how these walking skeletons embraced me out of sheer joy.
We were suffering from typhoid. We had lice. They put their arms around us. It was an unforgettable experience, even for these sisters.
The SS at Wewelsburg planned to kill all 42 witness prisoners before abandoning the camp. Why? The witnesses knew where the SS had hidden stolen art treasures, plundered from across Europe. In the frantic final days, 4 execution attempts failed.
We were to be taken through the forest, which was close by, away from the front, and then we were to run into machine gun fire from the SS to give the impression that we had run into the front lines of the Americans.
Suddenly, the Allied troops bombarded Wewelsburg. The guards scattered. Mox and 10 other prisoners ran for cover in the north tower of the castle. Ironically, it was the very place that Himmler envisioned as the center for SS cult worship.
In this shaft, we hid ourselves, and the wall, 3 meters thick, protected us. We waited until darkness, the SS had disappeared, and we were free.
Adolf Hitler had often stood as a guard before a vast sea of troops in Nuremberg at the Zeppelin Meadow. But now, it was the witnesses who assembled on these very same grounds, and Adolf Hitler was gone.
The unity among the sisters and the brothers, that gave us so much strength. It was our aim to endure under all circumstances. We never prayed to be set free. We prayed for strength to endure. Everything else was unimportant. What mattered was standing up for Jehovah's name.
Franz Wolfhard expected to be executed like his father and brother before him. Thinking of his mother, his bride-to-be, and his fellow witnesses, he wrote his farewell poem in 1944, while captive in a Nazi camp.
In my faith, I will always stand firm, though this world may taunt and cry. In my hope, I will always stand firm for a beautiful, better time. In my love, I will always stand firm, though this world repays with hate. Devoted, I will always stand firm, though this world disloyal stays. From God's word flows the might of the strong, and the weak ones it powerful makes. In God's grace I will always stand firm. On my own I could never remain. With my life I will even stand firm, and as I my last breath confer, you should with that dying gasp hear, I stand firm, I stand firm, I stand firm.
Ich bleibe fest.
These words echo the determination of the thousands of witnesses, living and dead, who stood firm against Nazi assault.